Before we begin, let me take the privilege to give a brief introduction of our speakers to the audience. Mr. Renjen was raised in Rohtak, Haryana, and after pursuing a master's in management from Willamette University, he was hired by Touche Ross, which later emerged into Deloitte as we know it today. He became Global Deloitte CEO in June 2015 and was re-elected in 2019. His journey hasn't been a bed of roses though, which is also why Sir has been a huge proponent of hard work and has never minced his words when manifesting the importance of the same. Punit, sir, I remember this one time when you very famously said that you've got to get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. And I see, as it turns out, by virtue of circumstances, we're all acknowledging the same by adapting ourselves to the online mode of being. We would have loved to host you offline, but nevertheless, I'm sure all of us are in for an exciting and amazing session. We're delighted to have you with us, sir. Mrs. Shweta is a senior editor at India Today, a policy wonk who spent the last 17 years reporting on policy, business, and economics. She's previously worked with CNBC TV 18, Bloomberg UTV, and Inside Washington Publishers. She was also chosen as a young global leader at the World Economic Forum for her undeterred contribution to journalism. We welcome you, ma'am. Not taking any more time, I would now like to open the floor for discussion.
Thank you very much, Methali, and a very warm welcome to Mr. Renjen. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you on a Sunday morning, and a big congratulations to SRCC for a very fascinating lineup. I was just going through some of the speakers that you all are getting. I think it's a very interesting lineup, and virtual is the only option. So I think we're all making do with the best that we can. I believe the format is that I ask questions to Mr. Renjen. Methali?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right.
I think it'll be great if we can start with Mr. Renjen sharing some opening remarks, and then we can move on to a moderated conversation, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I hand it over to you, Mr. Renjen.
Good evening. It's late in Oregon, where I'm coming to you from. It's good to see you all. Mithali, you did an excellent introduction. You speak with a lot of confidence. It's great to see. And I'm, Shweta, open to doing it any which way you want. So I'm happy to take questions. In fact, what I would really enjoy is interacting with the students. I think that's the reason why I've stayed up late on Saturday night when I should actually be in bed by now. But I'm really looking forward to that. You know, I grew up in Rohtak, Mithali. You're absolutely right. I remember 40 some years ago taking the Haryana Roadways bus that would go past the Shriram College of Commerce. In fact, I think it's the second college in from that main road. And I remember having a few friends that were in your college and coming and visiting them. So it was a real honor to be there. But never in my wildest dreams did I ever imagine that I would be speaking to you all as the global CEO of Deloitte. So it's a real honor to be with you. Maybe the moral of that little vignette is that be yourself. Don't let anybody define you, because at age 18, if you had lined up all the kids my age, I don't think anybody would have expected that I would amount to anything. In fact, I recall at age 18, a couple of my father's friends saying, what's going to happen to Punit? And 40 years later, I get the real privilege of speaking to you and leading Deloitte. I'll just have 3 or 4 key comments to start, and then Shweta, turn it over to you. One, COVID-19 has been just absolutely terrible. But my overarching comment is that we're in it together. I know my mother lives still in Rohtak. I know that India is going through a new wave, but we have to address this issue. And this is a truly global pandemic and a global issue. If you inoculate individuals in the United States and not address the rest of the world, we will not be able to get past COVID-19, and we must get past COVID-19 for the world to come to some semblance of a new normal. That's my first point. The second is that even in this terrible year, there are some silver linings. One such silver lining is climate. In the last year, global CO2 emissions have gone down 8%. Before my father ran out of money and I came away from boarding school, I was in a boarding school on the foothills of the Himalayas. And I could see from there, from the Shivaliks, the beautiful Himalayas. And for a long time, every time that I went back, that view was obscured. And again, during this pandemic, you can actually see those Himalayas again. This is the silver lining. We cannot go back to the way that we used to live. We must address as a global community some of the issues that are plaguing us. Climate is one such issue. Income inequality is another issue where we must get the rest of humanity to a standard of living, and there can't be the inequality that we are all experiencing. So that's a silver lining in my view. And the way that we have been working this last year through remote work, the way that we've been consuming, those are some of the silver linings that we must adhere to. The third point that I want to make is that I really firmly believe that this is India's century. And it's because of people like you. And that's why I stayed up late on Saturday night so I could speak with you. But we waited 75 years since independence, but the talent that is in India, the real vibrancy that is in India, the democratic tradition for 75 years that is India, this is India's century. And it's up to you to really do your part and make India lead and get its rightful position in the world. And I can tell you this, that Deloitte will do its part. We're the largest professional services firm in the world, and we have 50,000 professionals in India. We're investing heavily in India. I committed to Prime Minister Modi that we will hire 75,000 additional professionals in India over the next number of years. And I'm not doing this because of my Indian heritage. I'm doing this because the talent is in India, because of people like you. And so we will do our part. We will hire in India. We will invest in India. One thing that I am really proud of is what we are doing with what we call world class, which is our commitment to impact 50 million people positively between now and 2030. 10 million of those are in India. And the commitment that we made in India is that we're going to focus on women and girls, because there are 175 million women and girls in India that are not educated. And through our biggest asset, which is our people, and other NGOs, we will impact 10 million, 1 crore women and girls. And we've impacted 4.5 year to date. Actually, since we commenced the program for the last 2.5 years. But we will impact 10 million women and girls and give them the skills so that they can break the cycle of poverty. So Deloitte will do its part. Shweta, with that, I'm open to any questions that you might have.
All right, so wonderful, Mr. Renjen. I've never had the opportunity to meet you in person, but would definitely love to do so. What a lovely story, from Rohtak to a global CEO at Deloitte. I think it's one of those stories that you would probably read about in a book and feel that, okay, I can do this, so many congratulations for that. I want to, and I love the optimism and enthusiasm you've, showcased about India. And I think it's so important, especially we're speaking to a very young audience who, when you're younger, you tend to constantly question, which is great, and you also tend to be a little more pessimistic than optimistic. I think optimism is a muscle that needs to be exercised over time, right? When you say that this is going to be India's century, considering we are going through, I always refer to this war against COVID as the war that our generation and the generations before us are fighting. I mean, this is our freedom struggle, or this is our this is the war that we are going to fight, and it's changed us. It's going to change the way we look at the way we look at the world. It's going to change the opportunities that are presented for us. So I want to get your assessment of how are you viewing the Indian economy in the aftermath of the pandemic? Because today, when we speak, India is at the top in terms of the number of cases. We are going through an unprecedented time. So we are even contemplating lockdowns in different parts of the country. We've already gone through a massive lockdown. So I want to get your sense, your assessment of the next 1 year, say 2021 and 2022. How are you viewing that for the Indian economy?
Shweta, I'll start by first saying that I'm not an expert on India, certainly not to the same extent that you are, but I certainly am very interested in India. I will disagree with you in that this COVID-19 is not the challenge of this generation. It is absolutely a critical challenge. We must get past this pandemic, as I said in my opening. But if you are talking about challenges that this generation needs to address, climate, I believe, is the challenge that we must all address. Because what we have gone through over the last year will pale in comparison if we don't address the climate crisis that is before us. Listen, COVID is a vicious disease, and we must, to be able to get to any sense of normalcy, however you define it, we must address the virus first. And we know what needs to be done as a global community, as an Indian community. We must follow health guidelines, masking, social distancing, hygiene. And I think what has happened, I've seen it in the United States, in my community, I've seen it in India, is that once you make progress against the disease, you let up, and the disease doesn't let up. The other thing that we must do is vaccinate. And I think India has launched, and the challenges in India are very unique. It's a large country. I don't need to tell you this, 1.3 billion people. So vaccinating people is going to be a massive challenge, like nobody else is going to experience. So we need to do all of those things. And I think the government is doing all of those and is focused on it. And we will have hiccups along the way. We've seen it in the United States. We've seen it in Europe, where there are lockdowns. But I'm convinced that we will get past this.
Okay.
And I'm very optimistic about that. It might take us another 6-9 months, but we will get past it.
Okay, but how do we see the workplaces change beyond this? We've all been working from home. Yeah, I wanted to get your sense on the future of workplaces as you see it.
Well, I think there are a couple of things that this pandemic has done. One, it has been a real disruptor in the way that we work. Some of that disruption actually has been good. I mean, Deloitte is 300,000 professionals. In the month of March of last year, we took 300,000 professionals and moved them to remote work. I mean, the Zoom call that we're doing, I didn't know Zoom existed in March of 2020. I now use Zoom more than I use anything else. So the way that work gets done is going to profoundly change. Now, when we get past this pandemic, will we have 300,000 people working remotely? No. Will there be a hybrid model? Yes. We have 900 offices at Deloitte globally. Will we need 900 offices? No. Will they be configured the same way that they were prior to the pandemic? No. So the pandemic is going to change the way that we work. Pandemic is going to change the way that we consume. The online consumption and the way that we've consumed has changed. The pandemic has reaffirmed this technology-enabled secular growth trend. Part of the reason why I'm optimistic, part of the reason why I say it's India's century, is because I believe that we are on the cusp of a 15-year technology trend enabled by technology. There has been more digitization in the last 9 months than in the last 3 to 4 years. India, with its technology background, with smart people like the people that are from Shriram College of Commerce, is perfectly positioned to take advantage of that digitization wave, that technology wave. I'll give you another example, another thing that has changed, supply chains. I mean, India is trying hard to try and reconfigure supply chains. The fact that we were dependent on a few countries, companies have had to reassess supply chains. It's a great opportunity for India to try and attract foreign businesses to India and their supply chain. So I think there has been a lot of disruption, and there's also been a lot of change that is positive that will come out of this pandemic.
What about
I do want to spend some time, and I hope you ask me this question,
Sure.
about the positives from this pandemic.
Yes, so I was going to come to that. Let's get to that. And then I want to talk to you about the skill sets that you feel are going to be very crucial in this post-pandemic world.
Okay, well, let me try and answer that question first. I mean, I'm asked this question a lot when I speak to Indian students. I mean, STEM is certainly going to be important, but more than that, the ability to work with people and some of the softer skills are going to be far more important than purely STEM capability. If you're a great writer, that's going to be important. The ability to work in teams and motivate other individuals is going to be incredibly important. So I think some of those STEM skills that drive a lot of the technology wave are absolutely important. But here's the other thing, and I'm a very good example of that. You know, Shweta, there's only one Shweta in this world. My mother always says this, there's only one Punit, God help us. But, you know, try and be the best you possibly can. Every one of us has certain God-given skills. We have the capability to try and maximize those skills. Don't try and be somebody else. And I think in terms of the skills and capabilities for all the students that are listening, if the one thing that you can take away is that a brown boy from Rohtak, Haryana can lead a white shoe, 175-year-old, $50 billion organization. And there are multiple reasons, but one of the reasons is just try and be yourself and try and do the best you possibly can with the skills and capabilities that have been given to you.
That's wonderful advice, because, and I think it's more crucial as you go along, you find yourselves comparing, drawing comparisons with others. And it's so important to know the person that you are. This is something I have to constantly remind myself. It's a professional crisis. I mean, really, as one goes along, you keep thinking, okay, what am I doing wrong? And so that's wonderful advice. I want to ask you about the positives. Since we've only delved on the negatives of the pandemic, let's talk a little bit about the silver lining.
Well, I mean, one of the silver linings is around climate. I mean, it's been a wake-up call for us. The fact that we could get our emissions down. I think each of us individually, organizations like Deloitte and governments need to come together and address this crisis. This is the crisis of our generation. And it isn't an Indian crisis. It isn't an American crisis. It isn't a European crisis. It is the crisis of this generation. And shame on us. And I have a 17-year-old son. If we don't address the crisis today, I think my son and my son's unborn children will rue the fact that we as leaders did not address this crisis. And it has to be individually in terms of how we consume, how we exploit the resources of Mother Earth, what we do as an organization, and then what governments do together to try and address the climate crisis. That's been a wake-up call from this pandemic. I think we all need to do this. This is a must-do. The other thing that we must do, I think it is in this day and age, I think it's unacceptable that there are 175 million women and girls in India and elsewhere. By the way, these issues are not Indian issues. There are issues in the United States where there's racial inequality and racism. There's issues of income inequality all over the world, but because I'm speaking to an Indian audience, there are 175 million women and girls that are uneducated, and therefore they don't have the opportunity to take advantage of their God-given rights and God-given capabilities. We must address this issue.
Okay. I have a few questions coming in from the students here. Some of the names are there. Let me begin with the first question from Rishabh Kalra. Which markets have been worse hit by COVID, B2B or B2C? Why is it so?
Well, I think that's a good question. Everybody's been impacted by COVID. when we started our planning back in March, I expected that we would contract pretty substantially, double digits. We're a private enterprise, so we don't publicly publish these numbers, but when we finish our fiscal year in June, we will actually grow. And so everybody's been impacted. Everybody's been dealt the same hand. I think there are some entities that have played very solid defense, which is being protected, making sure that you have enough liquidity, making sure that you can still service clients in the B2B space, in the B2C space. But there are few, and I would put Deloitte in that capability, that have played really strong and excellent offense, realizing that everybody was dealt the same hand, and we actually use the opportunity to try and do things creatively. So I would say, at a macro level, hospitality, travel, and leisure have been, very badly hit, partly because of all the lockdowns, the lack of travel, but they will come back. And I think that from a industry sector standpoint has been a pretty big issue. But I'm very optimistic. The IMF came up with latest estimates. The United States is predicted to grow 6.5%. India is predicted to grow 12%. China 8%. So I believe there's going to be a pretty strong recovery across the board. And in the United States, with all the fiscal stimulus that has gone in, I think that recovery is going to have in the least 2 to 3 years worth of legs. But if I knew the answer to that, I would be an extremely wealthy man. There's impossibility to say as to what's going to happen a couple of years down the road, but in the least, all the indicators are very positive.
Mr. Renjen, I would like you to deep dive into your own journey, right? From Rohtak to leading an MNC. Any lessons, any life lessons that you'd like to share with the people watching you today? Any challenges that really made you think, that really pushed you? Any failures? Any lessons from those, the challenges that you've encountered in your journey?
First off, as I said at the start, if at age 18 you had lined up all my friends, I think the likelihood of anybody saying that I would be the global CEO of Deloitte would have been zero. Nobody would have expected that at age 18 I would be the one that would become the global CEO of a $50 billion organization. The point of that is that life is a long marathon, and don't try and get others to define you at a very young age, the age that you're at. Realize that it's going to take you some effort. It's going to take a long time to get success. What changed my life was a little bit of luck. I got the Rotary Foundation scholarship from Northern India. I'd never been outside the country, never been on an airplane, and they picked the United States and the state of Oregon. I never knew where Oregon was. So I ended up in the state of Oregon, sight unseen. And that really was the first lucky break that I got. And that was in the early 80s. And I realized that I was going to seize it the best I possibly could. The next break that I got was that I got hired by Deloitte in 1986, 87. And I haven't looked back ever since. The other thing that I say, which I don't think people are very glad to hear, but it takes a lot of effort. There's a writer, Malcolm Gladwell. In fact, I think I have his book back here. And he's written a book which says that if you want to be a great golfer, you have to practice for 10,000 hours. And he picked 10,000 hours to make a point. The point being, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of practice, and a lot of focus to get good at something. Once you get good at something, you get success. There are a few individuals that are very lucky and they get a break early on. But for most people, it's a journey like mine. It takes years of practice to get good at what you do. Shweta is a leading journalist because she has practiced her craft and she has put in the hours to get to be regarded as a good journalist. So my takeaway, my story is that it takes effort and there's no shortcut.
I want you to talk a little bit more about that. Were there times you were away from home? We are talking about the 80s. There was no email, there were no phones. We didn't have cell phones, came much later. It was a very different time. And I'm sure you must have been lonely. I'm sure there were times when you felt very daunted. How did you keep yourself going? And can you go back to that time a little bit, and how did you, because right now I feel we are so privileged, and this generation is even more privileged than my generation. When it comes to connectivity, we are connected across the world. You're sitting in the United States, I'm sitting in Delhi, and we are having this conversation. But I do remember I've had my family members go, and when they would visit India, it was a big occasion because it was such a rare thing, and talking to them on the phone was a big event in the family. So I want you to talk a little bit about that, about your moments when you felt vulnerable, when you felt weak, and how did you just pull yourself together, and how did you remind yourself of your goals?
Well, I mean, listen, I didn't ever have a goal to be the CEO of Deloitte. I mean, that's for sure at that young age. But you're absolutely right. In the early '80s, there was no email. There was no. I mean, you wrote letters, and once in a while, you got lucky, and at $3 a minute, you got a chance to listen to your mom's voice or your dad's voice. And I didn't see them for 6, 7 years, something like that. And I think what kept me going, frankly, was that my dad had run into financial difficulties. I mean, he passed about 2 years ago. I think he would be fine with me sharing this. And I knew that, for me to be successful, I had to tough it out. I think it probably helped that I went to boarding school when I was 6.5, 7 years old and stayed away from home for 9 months a year. It was a miserable experience, but for in the least the 6 or 7 years, it taught me how to be self-reliant. Um, if you've been to the United States, it's a wonderful country. And the people here, particularly in Oregon, are just wonderful. They're welcoming. I remember when I was in college, I started dating a American, and she took me home to her house for Thanksgiving. This is the world that we lived in the 1980s. And she called and she told her father that, and it's not the person I married, by the way. And she said, "I'm bringing my friend over, and he's Indian." And he asked her, "What tribe?" He thought I was Native American. So, that was the world that we lived in the early 80s. But, the people in the United States were very welcoming. And I knew that it was a great place for me to try and make a go at.
You mentioned
And,
that. Yes, go on. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, and Deloitte, when I did join Deloitte is a mentorship-oriented entity where people teach you the craft. So I did kind of put myself into my work, and that was a way for me to try and not have lonely feelings, if you will.
Okay. You did say that when you were 18, nobody would have guessed that you would be where you are today. What advice would you like to give to the 18-year-olds who are watching you today? And what is the one thing you would do differently if you could go back in time and be 18 again?
I would practice my cricket. I'd want to be a cricketer. That's what I would do if I was 18. I loved cricket. I mean, I still love the Indian cricket team. I didn't have the skill or the aptitude, and I certainly didn't put in the time. The advice that I would give is that, as I said, life's a marathon, and it takes effort. And if you keep focused, I have another philosophy in life. The same person that took me to her house for Thanksgiving knew that she wanted to be a doctor, and she's now a very successful doctor, and that's very lucky. Maybe there's some people in this 300-400 people that are listening to you and I speak, Shweta, that know exactly what they want to do, and they're lucky. They're the blessed ones, and I think that's a very small portion of the population. Most people are like me at age 18 who had no clue, and I happened to fall into a profession, in this case Deloitte, and I taught myself to love it through hard work, through becoming good at my craft. And so if you're the first category where you know exactly what you want to do, you're blessed. Go conquer the world, but that's a very small sliver of humanity. Most people are in that third bucket. And if you're in that third bucket, try and find something that you can teach yourself to love. And if you do that, then it becomes easy. Um, and you know, if you do it over and over again and you get good at it, and you if you love it, it's not work anymore.
That's very important advice, because you're absolutely right. Not everyone gets to follow their passion, and there's a price to follow that passion also. It does not mean it'll all be perfect at all times. Okay, I have some more questions coming in. I'm just, there are a whole lot of them. I'm just trying to see if we can combine a few. Okay, there is a question on what's your take on Biden's administration's plan to increase corporate tax rates and use the same for green energy infrastructure. This question is being asked by Narendra Aluri.
I'm not going to comment on taxes, but what I am going to say is that I applaud President Biden for his focus on green technology and on the environment. I've become I'm learning more about the climate issue. I've become a real proponent of what we need to do to try and address this issue. It's not only the right thing to do, it is the right business thing to do. And I think President Biden has it exactly right. The opportunities that will come from the new technologies that we will need to invent to try and address the climate issue, it will lead to opportunities, it will lead to new jobs. But even the non-technology related issues, like for instance, forestation or agriculture that is not dependent on chemicals, trying to get away from crop burning in India, and some of the or lower tech opportunities, I think it is a great opportunity for us to make these investments and change the way that we produce and the way that we consume. So I applaud the president. I think that is absolutely the right thing to do.
Parth Chaudhary.
And they will have to pay. They will have to pay for it somehow. And so I will, I guess, and I understand for individuals like myself that make more than others, we will need to pay our share. Corporations will need to pay their share, but I think it has to be done in a very thoughtful way so that it doesn't impact the competitiveness of American companies.
Parth Chaudhary has a question. If you believe there's one risk which can hold India back from reaching its true potential, what do you think that is?
I think it is, and this may sound like a little bit of a hokey stuff, but it's not believing in ourselves, in the Indian capability. India has everything going for it. It has 75 years of a democratic tradition. It is a really, really old civilization that has led the world for centuries. I mean, when the British came, we had what, 25, 26% of the global GDP. People wanted to come to India. It's a long, long history. And just what Indian business has done over the last 20, 30 years has been remarkable. And so not believing in what is possible in India, I think, is maybe the biggest risk. The other aspect is that we do need to make sure that the growth or the development that we have is inclusive. We have a large population and we need to get everybody involved and everybody uplifted. It's not an easy task. It's easy for me sitting in Oregon to be able to make those pronouncements. I know how hard it is, but I have tremendous confidence. I love coming to India. I mean, I love coming because my mother is there. I love coming because it's my home. But I love coming because of just the optimism. There is a certain vibrancy in India. And you maybe don't see it because you live there every day, but it's an amazing place. It's just wonderful. My wife, who is American, and she's been to India maybe 35, 40 times, and she's learned the language and the culture. She says there isn't an ambivalent reaction when you go to India. You absolutely fall in love because India just envelopes you. You get off the airplane, the smell, It's a particular Indian smell, wonderful Indian smell. Just the people, and it's the optimism in India is amazing. It's infectious.
Okay, I think COVID probably has made all of us a little bit more nostalgic about their home country.
No, I'm not saying that, Shweta. I know the skeptical journalist in you has to ask that question, but I honestly believe that, I mean, India is really quite a dynamic place.
No, I love India too. So I see and I hear what you're saying. I've lived in the US for a few years, so I really feel the sentiment. There is another question, and I'm just rephrasing it a little bit. What are the qualities that you look for in a professional when you make your hiring decisions?
We get about 4.5 million to 5 million resumes every year, and we hire maybe, I would say, 40,000 people globally, maybe 50,000. So our acceptance rate is maybe 2% or some number like that. I'm not doing my math right, but it's a pretty low acceptance rate. There are certain givens. I mean, you must be academically accomplished. You must have the skills, demonstrated skills and capabilities that we're looking for. But more than that, what we are trying to discern in the 30, 40,000 people that we hire is whether you have the ability to work in a team, whether you have some of the base qualities that make individuals successful. Certainly working in the team, the intrapersonal capability, the base integrity and decency. And those are skills and capabilities that we really covet. And that's what, we will look at. A bulk of the individuals that apply to Deloitte, many of them have the core capability. They would have gone to a good college like Shriram College. They would have gotten the courses underneath them. They probably have very high GPAs, or what is the term that they use in India? Do you still use first division? I remember when I was growing up in India, they don't. Mathali is shaking her head. You don't have first division, second division, third division? No? What
Not
do you do
anymore.
now? No?
No, we don't really talk in, these division kind of format, but yeah, it's more like GPA, as you said. Yeah, we consider GPA.
Yeah, see, this has dated me. When we were growing up, we would have that first, second, third division. Anyway, we look for certainly accomplished individuals, both from an academic standpoint, but also what you've done extracurricularly, if you've shown leadership in a particular area. So all of those characteristics and criteria are important. But the intangibles are what we are focused on more than the tangibles.
But aren't the intangibles also more difficult to evaluate? How do you ensure that there is no subjectivity in that when people are meeting?
Well, you're absolutely right. The intangibles are more difficult to evaluate, but we have a pretty, as I said, every year we hire 40, 50,000. So we do have a process. We have multiple sets of interviews, and we are quite competent at being able to identify individuals that will fit in Deloitte, will be successful in Deloitte.
Okay. We spoke about climate change. I also want to talk about one more thing I think that the pandemic has shown us. What's really important in life when we design our life, the weightage that we give to different aspects of our life. And I think work-life balance has emerged as one of the key takeaways from this pandemic. A lot of people during the lockdown spoke about how they were reconnecting with their families, eating meals together, basic things that we had completely done away with, especially in families where husband and wife, everyone's working, schedules are haywire. So I want to talk to you about that. How much importance have you given to work-life balance in your life, and how do you consciously approach it? Like, is this something that, you know, because since they are going to be the future professionals, and as they chart out making a name for themselves in their professional areas, what advice would you give them on building this important dynamic in their own life, and how, you know, in their own lifestyle?
The notion of work-life balance is a misnomer. There is no way to balance work and life. There are work-life priorities. A long time ago, I realized that I will be defined as an individual, as a professional, by what I do at Deloitte. I'm not a great cricketer. I'm not a great artist. So my body of work is the impact that I create for my clients, for the people that work with me, and what I do for the firm. So that was important to me. That was a priority for me. A second priority for me is my family, my mother, my wife, and my 17-year-old son. What my son thinks of me when he becomes a man is incredibly important to me. And so those are my priorities. And then, of course, I put in a priority for myself in terms of taking care of my own health and well-being. You know, I'm happy to, I don't have any issue with this. I'm a diabetic, and I've been a diabetic for 30 years. I inherited it from my dad, who inherited it from his dad. And so it's really important for me to take care of myself. And so those are my priorities. And on a daily basis, I try and figure out a way to make sure that I'm meeting those priorities. Some days, I don't do a very good job in terms of being a parent to my 17-year-old son. Some days I can't work out like I like to work out every day. But on the whole, for a year, I try and focus on those priorities. And I think that's the way to look at it. Now, what COVID has done is that it has, the silver lining is that we can sit, it's 9:30, 9:45 at night. I can sit here, have a conversation with 300 people across the globe. I don't have to get onto an airplane and come to Shriram College and give a speech. That's positive. The negative is that my wife is on a Saturday night, I'm away from my wife, and I should be spending the time with my wife and my son on a Saturday night. But so I'm going to have to make it up to them tomorrow, Sunday. And the deal that I did with my wife to be able to do this is tomorrow, she and I are going to take a hike. Actually, I'm at our beach place. We have a place on the Oregon coast. And so I'm coming to you from the Oregon coast, and there's a beautiful 6-mile hike. And my wife and I are going to take a hike first thing in the morning because I focused on this meeting with you today.
Nice. Lovely. Okay, there is another question from Divyansh Sankla. The question is, what is your takeaway about handling a period of constant failures, and how to keep one going? How does one keep on going without losing hope and optimism?
Well, I mean, failures are just a part of life. On any given year, you will find that you may not be successful in an endeavor. You might not be successful in a personal goal. I think you just need to have a constant perspective that failure is something that you learn from, and that you don't let it get you down, because you've been given this gift of life. You just need to keep working and take failures in stride with successes. As you grow older, Shweta, and you tend to go back, maybe your point about being nostalgic. One of the things that you start thinking about is the way that you were brought up. I was brought up a Hindu, and if you think about Hinduism and you think about that fabulous discourse that Krishna gives to Arjuna on the battlefield in the Bhagavad Gita, and he talks about duty, and he talks about focusing on the act of doing, action, and not really focusing on outcomes. And it's really hard to do. It's easy to say, but if you do that, failure is just like success, because you're not really focused on the outcomes. You're focused on just the pleasure of action and the pleasure of doing. Now, again, I can say these things. They're harder to do than and easier to say.
I hope that answers Divyansh's question. There is another question from Ananya Narang. She wants to know, which one of the two do you think is better in the corporate world? Deep knowledge about one topic or little knowledge about all topics?
Both. You have to be good at something and to be known for something. So you need to have deep knowledge in a particular area and expertise so that people can call you and you have something to say to a client or to a customer, particularly in the professional services world. But you also need to have a broad-based understanding of how business works. So I don't think it's either or.
I want to ask you, Mr. Ranjan, in India, there's a lot of focus right now on ease of doing business, and you work with clients across the globe. What advice would you have for the Indian government from a policy perspective to help nurture businesses in India, to attract more investment into India?
Well, I think India has a lot of things going for it. It's a rule-based economy and a rule-based country. It's a democratic country. I think those are very attractive to foreign investors. But foreign investors are also very interested in making sure that the investment that they make, they can actually make a profit on it and be able to take with ease the profits and invest them elsewhere if they can. So the rules need to be pretty clear. They need to be very easily understood. Some of the bureaucratic aspects, red tape, I think if that can be reduced, I think India is making fabulous progress over the last number of years in terms of moving up on that ease to do business index. I think that's really important. And it's not just important for India, it's a competitive environment. Multinational corporations have choices. I mean, they can either invest in India or they can invest elsewhere. Particularly when we talked briefly about supply chains. You can invest in Vietnam or Southeast Asia if it's easier to do business there versus India. So it's in India's interest to make sure that red tape and bureaucracy is to its minimum. Now, India also is a democratic country, and India is also trying to balance inclusive growth. So I understand that, and so they need to be able to put that in perspective as well.
Prime Minister Modi, when he visited the United States, he got a resounding reception from the Indian Americans there. Across the world, sitting in India, one gets a sense that he is exceedingly popular. I want to get your assessment or your sense of what is driving Mr. Modi's popularity, and is it so? Is he as popular as as us? We tend to think that he is, while sitting here and watching all the visuals on the reception that he got in New York and so on and so forth.
Oh, he's absolutely very popular. I've had the privilege of meeting with him multiple times. The thing about Prime Minister Modi is the fact that he has absolutely great self-confidence with humility. I love the fact that he speaks in fluent Hindi. Given our heritage, I think that's actually a sign of real self-confidence. I mean, of course, he speaks fluent English as well, but I mean, many times when he meets with business leaders, he will address the business leaders in Hindi. I think that's a real sign of self-confidence. What makes a leader popular is if they project a sense of self-confidence, a sense of confidence in the country that they lead. They have clarity of direction, and he seems to have clarity of direction, some decisiveness in terms of the way that he makes decisions. I think all of those things contribute to a leader being perceived positively. And you're absolutely right. I mean, he is perceived very positively across the globe, particularly in the Indian American community.
That's quite wonderful and very encouraging to know. From the time when you were invited for dinner, and a question was asked what tribe do you belong to a time when Prime Minister Modi is an Indian Prime Minister is getting the recognition and getting the respect that he's been getting across the world. I think it's quite a journey even for India. There is a question.
Well, let me interrupt you there. I mean, Prime Minister Modi is emblematic of India. So, you know, India is the leading country in the world. It's the fifth, sixth largest economy, heading to the third largest economy. It's soon to be the largest country in terms of population. Maybe we're taking over the world by producing a lot of Indians. Who knows? But you know, the largest democracy in the world, and so I think part of the reason why he is he's certainly a very accomplished leader. He's as I said, has all the skill sets, and that's why he earns the respect. But he's also emblematic of India.
Manya Arora has a question. As a 19-year-old, what habits and skills other than academics should one develop to become a successful professional ahead in their life?
Academics for you and extracurricular activities is probably the most important thing. At this point in time, I say this to my 17-year-old son: get the best grades you possibly can, and develop interest across beyond academics so that you actually have a broad set of interests and capabilities. I think that is the most important thing. The other interesting thing is, as I've said multiple times, life is a long marathon, and don't get overly stressed. One of the distressing things that I read about is the young people that go to extremes because they don't do well academically. Yeah, so what if you don't do academically? Look at me. As I said to you, at age 18, I was the kid lined up with all my friends. They were going to medical school. Someone was going to engineering school. They were all saying, "Ye bichare Punit ka kya hoga? Ye bichara Punit ab global CEO ban gaya." You know, life is a long journey, and so don't get overly stressed about it. Enjoy yourself as well at age 19. I would give anything to be 18 or 19 again.
That's true. Youth is wasted on the young.
Yes.
There's a reason why these proverbs exist. When we talk about acquiring skills that will help us in the future, when we talk about optimism, when we talk about motivation, we often overlook the importance of, especially when you're 18, the importance of working with others. And you did mention that it's very important that you should have the ability to work with others. That's one, like working in a team. Second, from my personal experiences and my interactions with a lot of young people, I feel that somewhere there's a disconnect later on in life, and there's a disconnect between what they think how their life should be and what it turns out. It leads to a lot of resentment and a lot of negativity. So I want you to talk a little bit about that. When you say life is a long marathon, I feel that young people need to hear that there will be a discrepancy between what you think life should be and how it turns out, whether it's your first job, whether it's success as how you view it, and how does one take that, and why it's important to build your ecosystem where you can actually just be yourself. Because I think it's very difficult. A lot of people find it very challenging to build those authentic relationships where they can talk and really talk. And mental health is now emerging as a big concern amongst all categories of people, not only young people, but across the board. And one of the reasons for that is lack of, not reasons I would say, but one of the reasons why people end up suffering so much is also because they do not have the authentic and real relationships.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I think the answer was in your question, in the way that you framed your question. I mean, relationships are incredibly important, and outcomes, certainly are important. But anybody at age 18, 19, 20 knows as to how their life is going to turn out, I think is absolutely fooling themselves. Nobody has a specific idea. You have a general sense in terms of where you want to go. If you have a passion at that age, you want to do X, Y, Z, and you know exactly, that's great. Go ahead and follow that passion. But as I said, most people are on a journey. take that journey and try and get good at something. Listen, it's been really good to talk to you, Shweta, and to the students. I can take a few more questions, and then it's getting late here.
Yes, absolutely. So, in fact, I was just going to say very quickly your concluding remarks, your concluding comments to the people watching you today, and then I'll hand it over back to Mehta.
Well, I just want to say thank you for having me. As I said, it would be great. 19, you've got life. The fact that you are at a great school like Shriram College, you should feel very proud of it. You should be very proud of being Indian. At the start of my talk, I said this is India's century. I'm not just saying that to earn your favor. I really believe that. I think what India has done over the last number of years is remarkable. But the opportunity for where we actually take the country and lead in the world is right there before us. Let's navigate through this COVID-19 crisis together. We are in it together. This is a global crisis. I have faith in the government, the Indian government. I think they are going to help navigate the country through it. And let's seize on some of these silver linings we have that we discovered through this pandemic, and particularly address the climate crisis. It was fun to be with you. And again, good night from Oregon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Renjen. I really enjoyed our conversation. I hand it over to you, Maithili.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'd like to thank our speakers for that riveting and inspiring talk on the state of the Indian forward. I hope most of us had something insightful to take away from this session. The Economic Society SRCC to Mr. Renjen and Ms. Shweta for taking time out from their busy for our summit. And also, sir, we're glad we could be a reason for that hike you're going to take tomorrow. I hope you have a great time. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.